It's an honor and a pleasure to be here this evening to present you with the budget. And I would ask Stephen to um, put up the document now. Thank you very much. So flipping to the first page, and this is going to be a little bit of a challenge because we're in different places and trying to accomplish this evening, but we'll do the best we can. So let's look at what the board set out in 2020, back in late 19, what they said they wanted to accomplish. Expanding the solar, it's happening at the marketplace in the South Fire Station, $100,000. Redevelop the core Pika areas. We hope to have the buildings down in the village of Okemos by December 15th. And Pine Village up in Hazlitt's on your agenda tonight. The marketplace on the green, tentatively scheduled for a ribbon cutting in just 3 weeks on October 7th. Fixing our roads. Remember, we have 146 miles of local roads. Our goal was to hit 15 miles in the first year. As you know, we hit 26 miles of repairs. We have approximately 13 or 14 the toughest work done, the reconstruction, and the crack sealing is yet to happen. Fully commit to MERS. We did that and beyond to our pension, and begin construction of the pathway. The phase 1 from Hagedorn to Park Lake Road over the Red Cedar Bridge is planned in 2021. And continuing on, what are our top 10 goals for 2021? What is this budget comprised of? What are our ultimate goals? Number 1 is to eliminate our pension debt and to continue down that path. Again, redevelop our core Pika areas, implement year 2 of the road program, purchase the new ladder truck, and have a very conservative budget approach because of COVID-19. We want to expand solar. There's another $100,000 in this budget to continue. We're in our third expansion or third installment of solar. Expand our emergency warning sirens program. Remember, just a few years ago, we only had 4, and we need 15 to cover the township. Number 10 is in this budget that's before you this evening. We want to restore the redevelopment fund. As you know, we had $700,000 for the redevelopment fund. The board authorized $130,000 of that this year. That was for the small business grants that were well-timed for the township. There's $130,000 in this budget to restore that back to 700, and we plan on appropriating that 700. It's been there for 5 years. We plan on expending that in 2021 between the 2 Pika areas. Maintain our infrastructure and expand that, such as the Nokomis roof and other things, and of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have money set aside for that this year. And our infrastructure, of course, we did the HVAC as well. What are our budget concerns? Top 5 concerns for 2021. There's always concerns. Number 1 is our MERS. We expected to go up in 2020, and we actually went down 1%, 63 to 62. We beat the average in the state of 2.8% reduction, but still, we did see a setback in this last year. Park millage funds were basically dry. Between all of the projects that we've accomplished in the past year or two, namely the marketplace and what's going on at the Harris Nature Center and the historical village and the large dog park, lots of great improvements, but we're pretty tapped out on our park millage funds. The effects of COVID-19, state shared revenue. Of course, we got good news this morning on state shared revenue. The House and Senate leadership is talking about not reducing state shared revenue going into their next budget year, which of course their budget year is October 1, while ours starts January 1. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the challenges that we have in police and fire and recruitment. Going over to the general fund. Here's a summation of the general fund in totality. Our total budget is about $52 million. So when you look at the general fund, and that's how we fund police and fire and basically all of our operations, you can see that we have expenses planned at $23.3 million and revenues of $22.6 for a net loss of $682. And you're saying to yourself, do we have a structural deficit? Are we going to expect to have this deficit again next year as we go into the following year? The answer is no. We don't have a structural deficit, and I'll tell you why. If you consider our one-time expenses that we have in this fund, and there are in the general fund, and there are a number, but the large ones would be the redevelopment fund. Remember, I just told you that we plan to expend that fund this year. So it's a $700,000 liability in the budget coming up, and the capital outlay of $245, which I'll get into later. But there's $945,000 of one-time expenses that we really if they were removed from the budget, this is what we would have. We'd have revenues of 22.6, expenses of 22.4, and we'd have a surplus by just eliminating those two one-time costs. So no, we do not have a structural deficit. Total budget, expenses of 52.6 million, revenues of 48.1 million. And again, you say, wow, how can we be $4.5 million underwater? Well, we're not. I'll explain. The deficit is $4.5 million, but you got to remember the local road program, the funds for that we received last year. So we're now expending those. So you can take out the $3.5 million for the local road program because we have the funds, but we received those last year. And then we have a significant pathway construction project of 632. Again, we've been saving money for that. Those funds are in there, but we're expending it this year. So truly on a $52 million budget, our deficit's 363. But of course, keep in mind, that's really not the true picture, because if you eliminated one-time cost out of this budget, you'd be operating at about $1 million surplus, not 300, but the $1 million in one-time expenses. How are we doing on our debt? Well, we're doing extremely well. And if this board is not proud of anything, this is one thing you should really be proud of. These are the three main liability debt issues that we have in the township: the Township Pension Fund, retiree healthcare, and MERS pension. And as you can see, going back to 2014, the Township Pension Fund debt has almost been cut in half. And retiree healthcare, the same thing. And MERS pension, about $10 million. How have we done that? Well, the first two, we've accomplished that by having an overpayment on our actual required contribution. If you go back and you look at the last 5-year budgets, I've been telling you we're putting in a double payment for retiree healthcare, and we're putting in a double payment on the Township Pension Fund. And so that is the reason those have been severely reduced our liability. And the same thing with MERS. So we've had really success in eliminating our legacy cost over the last 6 years. And this shows you the funding position of those three funds. Township Pension Fund, 76 to 87, retiree healthcare, a huge jump to 89. We're almost at 90% funded with those two funds. That's really significant. And the MERS pension fund is creeping up, not at the pace we'd hope it would, but it's gone up. Pension, let's talk about the MERS pension. And here's the funding levels for each of the units that we have. And the one thing that you're going to note is Public Works went down from year to year, and so did the clerical, and so did the Teamsters. How did police and fire go up? First question you would ask looking at this, right? Well, let me try to explain that. We made a decision 2 years ago that when we were making the extra payments in the MERS, we were going to put that $1.5 million into a surplus fund. We were not going to put it into the actual funds, because if we put it into the actual funds, what would it do to the ARC, the required contribution? It would artificially lower the ARC so we could pay less in because we were putting the surplus fund in. We said we don't want to do that. We told the voters that we would not reduce the amount that we were required to pay by putting in this extra money. So we've let the ARC, the required contribution every year, continue to escalate at its normal rate without an artificial influence involved. And we've taken that $750,000 and put it into a surplus fund. So the numbers that you have today, take that surplus, that 1.638, the growth on the 1.5 this year, and I allocated it to the police and fire departments. So as you can see, those are the true numbers if the surplus funds were in the actual funding level. Overall, we're 62%. State average is 73. MERS tells you that if you want to accelerate to 100% funding, and it's included on page 3 of the actual report, you need to make a monthly payment of $373 instead of $280 a month. And here's our pension contributions for 2020. Police of $750, fire $750, that comes from the millage. Our annual required contribution is only $2.8 million. What's our total contribution? Our total contribution, if again, going down to the required 100% funding, that number that I just showed you that they gave us of $373 a month, That's 4.47 million a year. So here's the number. If you really want to be bold and not just pay 2.8 million, if you want to really be a bold community, you need to allocate 4.4 million to accelerate yourself to 100% funding in 10 years. Our contribution this year, 4.7 million. We are putting in well beyond what MERS tells us to get to 100% in 10 years. In fact, we only need to put in 2.8 and we're putting in 4.7. So we're putting in a 1.9 million more than that's required by MERS. And you say, well, we have the millage. Yeah, the millage is only 1.5 million. That means we're putting another $400,000 of general fund money with the millage money to put that $1.9 million on top of the ARC. Downtown Okemos, let's switch to some projects. Downtown Okemos, we hope to have the buildings down by December 15th of 20. That's a goal. We're talking with the developers and we hope to make that happen. Pine Village, exciting project in front of you this evening for the Brownfield plan. Our roads, we've done extremely well this year, and I credit Mr. Deputy Manager Perry for leading that cause. Budgeted local road. We made another promise, didn't we, in 2017 with a road millage, and we said, we're not going to reduce our own contribution if we get this extra dollars. And here's the facts. Last year was 3.922. We didn't say we were going to increase it, but we said we weren't going to reduce it, if you recall. This year's contribution, 3.952. We're putting in $30,000 more into roads than we did last year. We're keeping our promise. And here just shows you the amount of the 3.5 million that goes into reconstruction and the 457 into preventative maintenance. What's our tax base? Where are we heading as our tax base, as our community? 2019, it was $1,819 million. This year it's increased 2020 to $1,872,000. Communications, how's the reorganization gone? It's gone smooth. Remember, our budget was $680,000 just a year ago, and we reduced that down to $355,000. Our core services of website, marketing, media, and I give a lot of credit to Ms. Guthrie, who's done a great job helping us on the handoff, and Brandy Yates and Andrea Smiley and Sam, they're just doing a great job of continuing our communication efforts, and I really appreciate that. Parks and Rec, you know, we have great leadership in the Parks Department, and this is just a sample of some of the projects. Director Maisner and her team, and Jane and Mike and Emma and Robin, and the work that they've done over the last year. It's incredible. If you go to the Harris Nature Center or the Marketplace, I know citizen Joyce Vancouvering just got back in town today and texted me and said, I hadn't seen the Marketplace. It's phenomenal. Copper roof, love it. Yeah, people are really this is going to be the gem of the township. I applaud all their efforts. The police department. You know, we've got great leadership in our police department. It's a struggle recruiting right now. But again, we're doing everything we can to try to recruit and keep the police department to where it needs to be. We're budgeting for 41 officers. I would tell you, though, if you look at your budgets, and if you have them in front of you on page 122 of your budget, you'll see a number in there of 240,000 on the revenue side. I just want you to be familiar with where some of the numbers are in the budget. And that 240,000 revenue number on page 122 on the far right-hand column, that's the $240,000 contract we have with our good neighbors, Williamstown Township. That's where the revenue is. And then, of course, we're committed to 2 new radar signs, increasing our diversity. Chief Plaga and his team have done a wonderful job with diversity, and really thankful for the leadership we have. And I commend Chief Plaga on his 25 years of service. The fire department. Again, if you look at page 131 of your budget, you'll see an equipment line under the fire department. It's the last line under the fire department. Page 131, fire department budget. You'll see money in there for equipment. I think there's 40, I don't have it in front of me, but if I recall, there's $45,000 budgeted. 35 of that is the siren, and that's your 10th siren that will go up. And if you look at page 163 of your budget, you'll see a motor pool budget of $1.7 million. And that's where the $1 million will come out of for the new ladder truck. Again, page 163, $1,709,000. $1 million of that is the new ladder truck. Moving over to motor pool vehicles, since you're on that page, here is the breakdown of the motor pool. And it's a very ironic, it's really interesting tonight when I was hearing Mr. Volby so eloquently talk about Mr. Veenstra. You know, I worked with Mr. Veenstra from 2013 to 2016. And the last time we got involved in buying a sewer vac truck, which is on the agenda tonight, which I find very interesting, it was after the meeting, and Mr. Veenstra came up to me and said, "Why are we leasing, paying over time on this sewer vac truck? Could you run the numbers and see, because the interest cost is $31,000. Could we possibly pay cash and save that?" And I went back and I talked to the leadership at that time, and he was right. We had just enough. We had about $20,000 left over in the budget to pay cash for it. And it was Mr. Veenstra who led the cause that year to pay for the last time we bought a sewer vac truck, and we paid cash for it. He'd be happy to know tonight we're paying cash again. These are some of the other items, the tool cart, a new mower, and police vehicles, and the ladder truck. $1.7 million. It's a big ticket item this year. The motor pool's never been that high since I've been here. Moving over to the motor pool revenue page, the red line indicates expenses for this year. You can see the 1.7 million. The purple line delineates our fund balance. And as you can see, even though we're purchasing $1.7 million, we're still going to have a fund balance of 725, which of course, Director Madison will tell you, puts us in really good shape. If you take a look at the past years of where we've been, so we're financially strong on the motor pool side, and people wonder, how does the motor pool get their revenue? If you go to the budget, you look at any general fund, you'll see a line item that says equipment rental. And equipment rental is money that each department pays into the motor pool fund for future purchases of vehicles. So that's how the motor pool is funded. General fund capital projects. This year we'll be doing $100,000. 2021. We have budgeted $100,000 for solar, some LED lighting. Again, it's just ironic we're having these conversations tonight. It brings back a lot of good memories. Exterior doors, a new roof for Nokomis, and the drinking fountain upgrades inside the building. Where was water and sewer fund, utility funds? Where are they budgeted to be at December 31 of 21? As you can see, the water fund will be at 3.2 million and be a little higher than it was in 2019, lower than it was in 2020. And the sewer fund will be higher than it's been in the last couple of years. Big projects coming up. In the Lake Lansing area, we're going to be doing $500,000 worth of sewer work. And we'll be doing others, so $190,000 to the north water tower, which is over Saginaw and Newton. So almost quite a bit. If you look, $1 million, if you add the two together, $1 million in water and sewer improvements. How are our water rates? Our water rates are in great shape. As you can see, what the proposal is for 2021, the quarterly billing would be $145 for a township resident. That's based on 12,500 gallons a quarter. And as you can see, this is a comparison to our neighbors. We are far, far below, and in some cases, half of what our neighbors charge for water and sewer. What about the promises we made in 2017? It's important to talk about. We can't just make promises to the community and then not come back and talk about them. We said in the police and fire millage, we would budget for 41 officers. That's true. We said we would budget for 32 firefighter paramedics. As you can see in this budget, that's true. We said we'd contribute $1.5 million a year for police and fire pensions. Well, we're actually doing $1.9 million plus. So that's true. We said we'd set aside $250,000 a year, and in 2021, we would buy a $1 million ladder truck to replace our 1998-99 model. That's true. 2019 came along and we said, we're going to make some more promises as it relates to roads. We said we're going to contribute 100% of the local roads millage to fix our roads, no administrative costs. That's also true. And we said we're going to continue funding to preserve our roads at a high rating. And as you can see the results of this year, that's true. We've increased our funding. We did obtain approval from Ingham County to administer our own program this year. And we do provide township staff on site to inspect the roads. Let's talk about staffing. This year's budget has 3 less positions than we had before, 1 in the recreation department. You know, our recreation revenue has been hit really, really hard by COVID. In fact, it's almost down to 0. Tens of thousands of dollars we've lost in revenue. So the decision was made in June to eliminate a recreation specialist position. We eliminated a planning position, position of when someone left, we didn't fill that position. And in finance, the position of purchasing coordinator, we tried it. It was a $100,000 a year job with benefits. And we figured going forward, we'd have to go back to how we operated the 40 years before that and not have that position. So the total change for this budget going into is 3 less positions. What have we done overall with staffing over the last 2 years? We had 169 positions in 2019 full-time, and we're down to 161. We're spending about $570,000 less on staffing in those 6 positions or 8 positions. How do we recap 2020? We recap it by looking at the marketplace on the green and the large dog park and our success with the roads. We look at what's going on at the Harris Nature Center, and if you haven't stopped out lately, please do. New restroom and pavilion, great additions to the Harris Nature Center. And of course, I'm sure you've seen the new restroom and facilities at the Historical Village. And of course, the solar, it's going to be pretty exciting to add solar onto the marketplace and to the fire station. And then we've got to determine where the money's going to go for solar in 2021. We have a new police canine. Aries has joined us. The HVAC replacements, how many communities are able to make over $2 million worth of improvements to their facilities and pay cash? And we're improving the pad in front of the South Fire Station. The concrete pad is in need of repairs. In summary, here's the 2020 special appropriations. So here's where, if there's any changes you want to make to the appropriations that we have laid out, here's where they are. $280,000 to local roads. Remember, that's a $30,000 increase over the 3 or 4 years before that. We went from $250 to $280. $130,000 to augment to get our redevelopment fund back to $700,000. $100,000 for solar array. The $450 to pay cash for that sewer vac. And also the contribution to the township pension fund at $146. And you're going to look at the budget and say, wow, that's down from years before. That's right. Because we've been paying so much extra over the last 5 to 6 years, our ARC, our required contribution, has gone down significantly. And this year, since we're about 90% funded, we're not contributing excess funds like we have before. We're paying the required contribution, but we're not paying additional. Art shared with you that we're paying $1.9 million in additional funding to MERS above the $2.8 million required contribution. And then some smaller amounts to the Historical Village, Meals on Wheels, the community band, and a new mower. The $30,000 for drinking fountain upgrades, the Chinese New Year's, the flags, the emergency warning sign that we talked about earlier, the contribution to OPEB, and you're going to say, geez, that was $450,000 before. It was. But by paying additional funds into the retiree healthcare, we now have that fund, which used to be when this board started, or slightly before this board started. Remember, the retiree healthcare was at 60-some% funded, and now it's 90, and it's gotten to 90 because we've been putting extra money into the retiree healthcare. Now we just have to pay the ARC the $207,000 per year. $70,000 for IT to improve our storage area networks, 3 police interceptors, LED lighting improvements, the ladder truck, the 4th payment, replacing the Nokomis roof, and there's $11,000 for 2 new radar signs. Where does that put us? We've gone through the entire general fund. I've hit on some other enterprise funds, and also talked about the total budget in totality of $52 million. But the general fund, which is 22 or $23 million, here's our fund balance. It's expected December 21 of 2020, December 31 of 2021. Where will we be 15 months from now? And after all the spending that I just went over and the allocations to different areas and the special projects, we expect a fund balance of 7.7 million. Now, right now, I can tell you today that I expect that to be over 8 million. And due to the fact that we heard today, if what we heard from the Michigan Townships Association and the legislature is true, we expect our state revenue share to be back at $300,000 or $400,000 more than its budget, than is proposed in this budget. Remember, we've taken a very conservative approach in this budget. So you can see our fund balance would be the highest it's been in a number of years, somewhere between 7.8 and 8.1 million dollars. That concludes my report tonight, going over our 2021 budget, what we've done, the success we've had, the challenges we have, and all the different areas that we want to fund and help support in 2021. So thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. Before I close, I want to thank all the directors for their assistance in putting the budget together. This report that you just were privy to was help provided by Deputy Manager Perry and Michelle Prince, my assistant. And I want to thank Director Madison for her assistance in working with the directors and putting the budget together. It was a real team effort, and we are in great financial shape.